Hey everyone, we are back with another public update video, and by we, of course, I mean with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
And so we could dive right in and just let you guys know what kind of progress we've been making on our game projects, and we're going to start with Damon Claw. And the big thing, we have an exceptionally good tester who's been giving us some great feedback and helping us find all the bugs that I had not until then spotted. And he made a great point about how there's some pretty cool stuff you could do in gameplay, and by now he's played quite a few times and he's quite good at the game. And he said it was kind of a shame. There is a score built into Damon Claw, but at the point he mentioned this, he said it's a shame there was no bonus. He had beaten the level 1 boss fight without taking any damage.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, it's a shame there was no bonus for that, or no bonus for any of the other kind of fancier tricks you can do in the gameplay. And I just realized that's something, like Corey and I, to speak for both of us, because I think I know this from past conversations with you, Corey, neither of us are really big on scores. We grew up playing a ton of arcade and action games as well as other types, but for us it was more beating the game, the kind of adventure and the gameplay, and not so much kind of competing with other people or yourself over a score.
Right. Yeah, it mattered more in the arcades and stuff.
Yeah,
there was like a public board of it, you know, but it does fit this game very well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of that high speed, high action. It's not like super complex combat or anything like that. It is a cool epic style story, but it's not a big giant time consuming Metroidvania. And since we already had just the score working and you would earn points by punching and killing enemies, there was just nothing beyond that. And we realized because of the feedback of that player that if we're going to have a score at all, we should really make sure it's as, no pun intended, rewarding and fun and more thought out like the other aspects of the game are. So we've been putting quite a bit of work into it, and we now have a mostly fully functional system, which I'm about to show everyone. It's not completely balanced yet, and there's a few more things that we probably want to add bonus points for. But I can show you guys what I'm talking about. So normally you don't see any kind of bonus. If you look down at the left-hand corner, bottom left, you'll see that there is the score that's been there for a long time. But now if I try to do a fancier attack like air bash somebody out of the air, oops, I'm not used to the new timing. There you go, it says air bash 1,000 points. And then there's several other things. I'm going to cheat and give myself some firepower to make some of these things easier to do for the sake of this demonstration. So if I...
it becomes I was going to say it becomes its own game within the game.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, one thing is I just landed on or punched to break that guy's boomerang blade he threw. And so that gave me a bonus. I think it was called Blade Breaker. I'm toying with this guy. I'm going to see if I could air bash him in the face. You can see face bash. I've given no thought yet to really balancing how much points you should get for any one thing, but you get the idea. And then there's the really fun bash combo where you air bash the airborne enemy into a ground-based enemy.
But it all does function very well, so...
Yeah, that was the first thing. Get it functional, get it looking nice and being not too distracting. Like at first, let me pause for a second. At first, if you can imagine this, all across the bottom of the screen with the same size font as the score was the big giant message. And I should mention too, I just earned a bonus point called Friendly Fire. So if you time it really perfectly and temporarily stun one of the birdmen when they had thrown out the boomerang blade and it's about to come back and you stun them so they can't catch it, they get skewered by their own blade and killed by it.
Nice.
Bonus points. That's one of the really trickier bonus points to earn, so I think that earns you a ton of points. And then, but yeah, if you could picture, not only was it giant text along the whole bottom of the screen, which was inherently distracting, but it also was blinking.
Yeah,
3 times
it was a bit
too much. So I'm almost certain that was your idea, Corey, to use a smaller font over the score, and that's just so much more elegant, and it's very plainly there, but not distracting at all.
Right.
And like you said, Corey, it's like it adds a whole other level of gameplay where once a player sees, see I did air kick, you could drop kick air-based enemies, but it just adds that whole other level of something you can pay attention to, increasing the replay value where people learn, oh, I just figured out I can do this fun, clever thing, or this tricky gameplay and earn more points. And then, of course, there's also, now that I'm at the end of this level, you'll see that, and now does a tally. And not only does it tell you the different ways you've earned points to help kind of give you that additional feedback, but also you could see there's a no-hit bonus for the level, and there is no death bonus. Yep, go ahead, Corey.
You forgot the U and button. There.
Yep, clearly a typo, but yeah, that's not how you spell button. It's button. What was I talking? So, oh yeah, it tallies the full game so far, accumulated score, but then the score you earned at that one level so far. And then, oh yeah, time bonus. That was the other important thing. So we have to figure out what's a reasonable amount of time to beat the level in, and anything beyond that, you get so many points per second or half a second or something like that. Right. So again, it's working, but we're going to have to balance how all this works. Another great suggestion that really good tester, he suggested, is to add a score multiplier, so the more hits and kills you score on enemies without getting hit in between will start to be a multiplier. So let's say normally
right. Even if they're normal points. Hits, you'll still yeah
because you manage to keep dealing damage to the enemies without getting hit yourself.
Right.
So like let's say it starts, you punch someone and you get 15 points. Maybe after you've punched 3 people without getting hit, maybe it's 20 points, and then it'll keep accumulating and let you know each time you've hit a new plateau of bonus points for dealing damage without getting hit in between. And as you can see, it's waiting for me to press the button now. So the nice thing is you can press the button pretty immediately to just get going. But for those that do care about the score, you have that time, that breath, or you don't have to wait for the other level to start to pause it for a bathroom break or whatever. You can, you know what I mean? Beat a level and put down the controller for a second if you need to. But we've also integrated this whole bonus and scoring system to the level 1 boss fight and level 2. We could show you level 2, but it's all pretty much the same idea as you've just seen. But we don't want to show the public the level 1 boss fight yet, so we're not going to show you that. But all of the different cool special things that take more skill or more cleverness now also give you those types of bonus points. Alright, and now let's move on to Metro Siege. So I'll be splicing in some footage that people have already seen of Metro Siege, because there's nothing I can show in this update video. But that does not mean we haven't made some really good progress. Corey and I had a really great productive meeting where we discussed the entire flow of Metro Siege, starting from what will be the opening cinematic that sets the whole thing, that leads up to the players walking out of that MMA gym. So we figured out where every boss goes, the opening cinematic. The only thing I think we didn't completely flesh out is the ending, but we got the basic idea and cool little Easter egg thing figured out, so that's going to be a surprise. No one will know that until the game is out there, so not even our patrons are keeping that kind of stuff a secret until the very end. But the point is, we got to the point where we had the core game engine of Metro Siege is really solid, core gameplay, the 3 playable characters, all that stuff is really solid, but what we needed to do was just figure out the full scope of the game, where the remaining bosses need to go, what their general sort of style is, and more importantly, the gist of their purpose in continuing the plot points of the game, and very quickly and smoothly making it make sense that these players are going from point A to point B to point C throughout the levels.
Yeah, I think we definitely landed on some good characterization, epiphanies, so to speak, along the way, and details of who these bosses are. All I'm going to say is that cyborg dinosaurs are pretty tough to draw, so...
So, and not only was that important to do, to get figured out, like it has to happen eventually before the game can be finished as far as the story goes, but even more importantly, it gives us such a concrete sense of scope for what's left to finish Metro Siege. And on top of that, over the last several months, I've made at least rough art for Alex Brown, the programmer, to be able to use to get all of the remaining level environments in there and working. So in the very near future, we're going to be able to play a kind of bare bones skeleton version of Metro Siege where we could progress exactly how we're supposed to from level to level. And at first it's going to just repeat the same existing thugs we already have, but eventually we'll replace those with custom thugs for each level. And obviously the same thing with the boss fights. For now, we might have Officer Bob showing up at the end of every level where there's a boss, just so we can get it working and get a real sense for how long it's going to take to beat the game, to make sure that's perfectly balanced, and just get in every bit of dialogue, every little cinematic scene roughed in, and then it's just going to be a matter of polishing what is there and replacing the kind of placeholder bits with the custom original final stuff. And so that's really exciting to be, we're right at the precipice of that giant milestone, and then just keep replaying and polishing, simultaneously perfecting the graphics and animations, the sound, and the gameplay. Oh yeah, and one more thing, like I said, unfortunately I can't show anyone yet, but I have started actually roughing in ProMotion, the fantastic pixel art program, the opening cinematic, so I know how those are going to be laid out, and I know one of the initial scenes of the opening cinematic, so that's in the works. And then I also just started making the very rough versions of a few of the later level thugs. But that's it for Metro Siege, so we're going to move on to one more project. Placeholder named Scorpion Boy, as I've said before. We did pick out a real name for the game, but we're not ready to reveal it yet. I want to wait until we can design a nice looking logo and a splash screen for it. But the point is, if you all recall, this is the playable character, and usually it's a pretty traditional side-scrolling platformer game. Some pretty cool and somewhat unique features to it. But I just started working on the second type of level for the game. So we're going to do what some platformers did back in the day, where it'll switch gameplay modes every once in a while to keep things fresh and kind of mix things up. I'm actually going to run the game. It's going to skip right to this level I'm working on, and there's no gameplay to see yet, but I just wanted to show you guys and explain the way this level is going to work from a kind of technical standpoint and a little bit of a game design standpoint. Alright, so here it is, and like I said, there is no gameplay to show yet. But you can see we've got a nice parallax background with quite a few colors and a very different looking character from the one you typically control in the game. We're going to reveal and explain that in a lot of detail in some future video, but the point is, to mix things up, there's something akin to a transformation that the player goes through at certain key points to different types of things with different abilities. This thing obviously can fly, and so there's going to be, at the very least, this one side-scrolling shmup level. One might be a vertical scrolling shmup level, some won't be shmup type gameplay at all, but it's just these ways to expand the gameplay experience and these nice little breaks from the typical platformer gameplay. And kind of the core concept of why these different gameplay sections happen is it's a way to travel broader distances in a not human biped friendly environment. So in this case, basically the player's going to come across a big open canyon, and this transformation thing I mentioned is going to happen so that the character can fly across a pretty vast different distance in a shmup style gameplay instead of, you know what I mean, some other means or whatever. It's just a good excuse to have more creative flexibility within the entire game and to mix up the gameplay. So, but to get technical, remember this game is being made, it'll probably end up on other systems as well, but this is being made using Scorpion Engine, which can make classic Amiga, which was an old 16-bit computer, like over 30 years old now, but it had power somewhere in the family of Mega Drive, TurboGrafx 16, and Super Nintendo in some ways, much weaker in some ways, but there are some pretty funny ways to compensate, or interesting ways. And one of those ways is, although on paper the Amiga's sprite abilities were really kind of pathetically weak for a 16-bit system, the weird thing was programmers learned you could do all these tricks to repeat the few sprites that it could display across the screen over and over again. And so this whole background environment is created using only 2 sprites, just repeated over and over. So it's a repeating pattern, but then you can also slice it up and scroll it at different speeds, which helps a lot to make it look less like a super repetitive pattern. And this is using 2 3-color sprites, but you obviously see there's way more than 3 colors in the background, and that's another cool trick you could do, where you could use the coprocessor, what they call the copper chip, and per scan line you could change any or all of those 3 colors. So you can end up with a pretty nice looking parallax scrolling, complete environment feeling background just with 2 of the potentially 8 sprites you have. And that leaves some sprites left. If I scroll down a bit, we should see, yep, there's a bug on it. Oops. We got some errant frames in there, but please ignore that. But you can see there's what's supposed to be rocks down there, and they go in front of the player. So that's just sprites, and there's still a sprite or 2 left for things like fast-moving bullets. And Eric Hogan is the programmer of Scorpion Engine, is about to add more features to allow for more tricks to get more sprites on screen. So, which is really important. You really want to be using sprites as much as possible for a shmup, because basically sprites have their own dedicated graphics display chip, so they can be moved around and updated without slowing down the rest of the game anywhere near as much as the typical method Amigas would use, which is called blitting. I don't need to get too detailed about it, but the point is that we should be able to get, even on the weakest version of the old Amiga computers, should be able to get quite a nice amount of moving things on the screen. But not only that, because I used only that sprite trick for the environment, that leaves an entire actual tile-based level map that can be used for something other than the environment. So if I scroll the nasty blinking rocks off screen and scroll around a bit, I should, here we go. So here's a rough sketch of a potential enemy type that is pretty big for the screen. Keep in mind, this is made out of just tiles, so we're going to be able to move giant things around, and we can also have animated tiles, and we could have things called blocks that behave like tiles but can detect collision and get blown up, and then we could change out tiles so it looks like it's damaged, you know, and use things like blitter objects and sprites to add explosions and all kinds of fun stuff. But the point is, we can not only have enemies that big, but because it's the whole tile map can be whatever we want, we could make it so the end of this level is just a ridiculously giant boss that takes several screens to scroll past. That's like a giant, weird technology, almost aircraft carrier, you know what I mean? Sort of like a floating platform with the enemies on it. Like you could see if you look carefully at my scribbled rough pixel art, I'm right in front of a little guy kind of manning a gun turret. So we could go crazy with that kind of stuff and just have this absolutely massive boss. And by the way, like I just started programming this earlier today, so you're not supposed to be able to scroll around like this wherever you want. The scrolling is going to be controlled automatically for the tile map, which is going to allow us to give the enemies, these giant enemies, whatever movement we want. We can make them come forward toward you in a nice little sine wave type movement. We could make them kind of rush in at you and then stop and go backwards, or whatever we want, having no effect on the background parallax, which is an infinitely scrolling environment, and having nothing to do with the position of the player. So it's confusing right now because it's me that, you know, I'm controlling the player, and that's scrolling around wherever I want to go. But that's not how the actual level is going to play, if that makes sense. It's going to be like a typical side-scrolling shmup. Everything is just coming at you, and you're dodging it in the real estate available on the screen. So that's how it's going to be. But just to show you, we're going to be able to have all kinds of giant enemies, which will be really fun. But anyway,
So,
yep, go ahead, Clay.
you could even do giant foot. It was.
Note to future self who's editing this, put in the footage of the ending of Shadow of the Beast. Good one, Corey. Alright, awesome. Well, that's it for the projects we've been working on. We're sorry it's been longer than usual between update videos. We have been busy. We just hadn't had the chance. And the other tricky thing was, until we got the score thing fully working in Damon Claw, and until I got this little sneak preview working for this game, we didn't have any new things to show. Some things we just need to start keeping secret, and other things are just too unfinished to show anyone yet. So we basically needed to wait until we actually had the time where we could both do it, because we've both been abnormally busy with day job and other family responsibilities. And we're just in that situation with all of our game projects where, oh well, we did this and this, but that stuff we can't show until much closer to the game's release. And then we started working on this other stuff, but it's too half finished to show. So we finally kind of crossed that threshold and had some nice stuff for you guys to look at. So that's why we did the video now. Oh, and I just remembered one more thing that's worth mentioning. Basically today, just as I'm finishing recording this video with you, Corey, I'm officially starting a 1-week vacation from my day job, which I'm really excited to basically have a full stretch of like 9 days starting now to really make some marathon level progress with all of our projects. So I'm really looking forward to that, which means our next update video probably won't take so long, and we'll have some really nice progress to show. But that will be it for this video. Thanks very much for watching.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.
But